So in this section, we're going to be looking at self-care for the caregiver. Now, we often hear caregivers tell us that they will be okay when their child is okay. And naturally, you want to prioritise your child when you are aware of what's happened to them. But in doing so, sometimes you forget to meet your own needs, and they are so paramount and so important in being able to best support your child. So I often liken this to the idea of getting onto an aeroplane. And when you get onto an aeroplane and they're going through that safety talk of what would happen in an emergency, one of the first things that they tell you is to prioritise putting your own oxygen mask on before anybody else's, regardless of whether you have children with you, regardless of whether you have family with you, friends with you. They say put your oxygen mask on before anybody else's. And the reason for this is because you are not going to be much use if you're in a position where you can't help others. So actually, by attending to your own needs first, you're in a much stronger position to be able to be there for the other people around you. So in this section, we're going to be looking at recognising and responding to your own emotions. So sometimes we can get quite overwhelmed. We don't have time to think about how we're feeling. Life gets in the way. You're busy juggling all these different life experiences, and then on top of that, you're obviously wanting to be there for your child. So we'll be looking at recognising and responding to your own emotions, as I've just said. We'll be looking at recognising the signs of burnout and looking at how you can develop a self-care plan. So how you can start to think about your own needs and how you can realistically get them met while at the same time caring for your child and your family and being there for others. So on this slide, we can see an image that says, you can't pour from an empty cup. Take care of yourself first. And again, this is illustrating, highlighting the point that was made in the previous slide about being on an aeroplane, an oxygen mask drops down, and the importance of putting your mask on before dealing with anyone else. So as it says, take care of yourself first. And in today's society, sometimes you'll hear that people will say that's selfish, but actually selfish can sometimes be mistaken for self-care. And it's important that we do look after ourselves, that we do take care of our emotional well-being, our physical well-being, because if we don't do that, essentially what we're doing is neglecting ourselves. So it's so important to check your own responses and utilise support for yourself as well. So we talk about support for the child or the young person, but actually we also need to think about what support is there for you as a caregiver. So children are extremely perceptive to adult responses, and we often hear that children don't want to speak to key caregivers because they don't want to upset them. So children are very sensitive to what is going on around them. We need to remember that most communication is non-verbal. So even if you aren't expressing yourself verbally about how you are feeling, children and young people will still pick up on things like body language, tone of voice. They will read facial expressions. And that's why it's so important to really consider what's going on for yourself. So we always encourage people to be responsive rather than reactive. And when we respond, what we're doing is we're thinking through what's going on for us. So we're checking in with ourselves and we're thinking, okay, how am I feeling? What thoughts are going through my mind? And how do I best say this to the other person? Is it appropriate for me to share everything that's going on in my mind, or do I need to reflect on what information is suitable for the child or young person to hear? Reactive is the opposite to responsive. So when we react, we don't go through that thought process. We speak our thoughts and feelings as they are happening in the immediacy, in the present moment. And although there can sometimes be a lot of benefit to that, sometimes that can be more of a hindrance than a help. So, as I mentioned in the previous slide, we do hear caregivers say, I'll get support when my child is okay. I want my child to be okay first. And that is completely understandable. Of course, you want your child to be okay. But it is so important to reflect on some of these points that will come up over this section. Children need their key caregiver to be resilient. And what we mean by resilient is to have an inner strength to be able to cope with what is happening in the here and now, or happening, outside of us. So being resilient doesn't mean being a rock. It doesn't mean, having no emotion. It's just about how to cope with emotion, how to help yourselves to bounce back from challenges. So if a caregiver is resilient, it will have a massive impact on your child's ability to move forward. On this slide, I just want to draw your attention to some of the feelings that you might be feeling as a consequence of what your child has disclosed. And I really want to normalise these feelings and say, given what you have heard, it is understandable to feel a strong sense of emotion. So some of the feelings that you might be experiencing may be anger, guilt or rage, shock, disbelief or repulsion, helplessness. You might be feeling a sense of loss, of grief. And for some people, they might be experiencing some revengeful thoughts. So if we look at some of these feelings in a little bit more detail, helplessness is a feeling that we often hear caregivers tell us that they are experiencing. The worry that you do not know what to do for the best for your child, feeling ill-equipped to be able to respond appropriately to them. And this emotion is one of the main reasons why we developed this course, because we want to empower you as caregivers to be able to feel confident and competent in responding to your child. It's not uncommon for caregivers to feel shock. Some people might initially not want to believe it. This might be a protective factor kicking in, that if you don't believe it, it won't be true. And again, feeling shock and disbelief can be really normal feelings, especially if the perpetrator is someone you have known. And when I say perpetrator, the person who's abused your child, if that person is known to you and you've known them to be a person who you think is loving and caring, then shock and disbelief are likely to happen. There can also be this real sense of loss, this sense of grief that you feel like you've lost a part of your child, that they are now different. And again, these are normal feelings, but through understanding them, hopefully you'll be able to work through them and know that these feelings, they're not static, they won't stay forever, but that in this moment, it is understandable. Betrayal, again, if the abuser was known to you, then there can be a deep sense of betrayal that someone you have known, who you have trusted, has done this to your child. And revengeful thoughts. So often when something or someone we love and care about has been hurt, we will think of things and ways that we feel like we want to get back at them, or we want to do something to them. And again, natural thoughts. The difference is whether you act on those thoughts or whether you think them. Obviously, acting on the thoughts could cause a lot of issues and a lot of consequences. So, just recognizing and processing that this is normal in this moment, but what can I do to be responsive rather than reactive? Some of the feelings that we've just discussed can result in changes in how you parent, maybe, or some of the boundaries that you put into place for your child. It might change how you interact with people. So, just want to cover a few things where you might notice that things have changed. So you might find that you're becoming overly protective of your child and maybe other children in your family. And this might be a response because you're worried about risk of harm coming to them again. And this is perfectly understandable, but it's about reflecting on how the child experiences that. So, for example, if you have an older child, a teenager, by changing boundaries, by changing maybe where they're allowed to go or who they're allowed to see, is that impacting on them accessing their support network? Is it stopping them from seeing friends and having fun and laughing? These are just examples, but it's just to highlight how being overprotective can affect a child. So it might be that through becoming overprotective, a message is also sent to the child that they've done something wrong. And this might not be the intention. I would hope it's not the intention, but in that aftermath of navigating the world after disclosing abuse, children can be very susceptible to how things are being communicated and messages. So if it's a case of you're not allowed to go out, then the message might be heard that I've done something wrong. So again, it's just reflecting on how you might be being overprotective and what are the consequences of that. It may be that you start to feel uncomfortable or embarrassed about the abuse. And we know that often people experience a high level of shame when abuse is disclosed. And what we really want to do is remove the stigma of abuse. Shame is something that people experience when they feel they've done something wrong. There's something wrong about them. But actually, what is wrong is that the abuser has chosen to abuse your child. So, although it may feel uncomfortable and embarrassing, that actually this is not a reflection on you or anyone else. It is about the perpetrator and the perpetrator only. So any sense of shame belongs to the person who has abused your child. Sometimes our feelings might result in denial. So it might be that we deny that something has happened. And this, again, denial is a defense mechanism. It's something that we use when we want to protect ourselves from strong emotion. So although in the immediacy that might be a natural defense mechanism that kicks in, it is so important to believe your child, to believe what they have experienced and to hear them. Because if you don't believe them and you don't hear them, then the impact that will have on them, both emotionally and within wider life, can be extremely detrimental. You may find that a rift has developed between you and your partner or you and other family members. And this is often because people react differently to stressful experiences. So one partner may weep and talk while the other stays silent. So it's about knowing that everybody responds to traumatic experiences in different ways. And one of the best ways to overcome that is to communicate how you are feeling in a healthy, responsive way. So, just to reiterate, these feelings and these responses are normal. So, I really want you to hold that it is normal to feel strong emotion. But if you don't have the opportunity to talk about those emotions, to access your own support, whether that be personally or professionally, our emotions as adults can get in the way of being able to help your child. So children can be very protective, and if they feel you are too upset by the abuse, they will stop talking about it to avoid hurting you. So we'll often hear young people and children say, I don't want to talk to mum, or I don't want to talk to dad, or I don't want to talk to the main caregiver because I don't want to make them sad. And although it's okay for you to feel sad, if your child can see that, then it can impact on them coming to you and seeking the support that they need. So this doesn't mean you should not feel that way, only that you should not let it hinder your child's healing. So no matter how you feel, it is unlikely that your child will share these feelings. For example, your child may still like or even love the person who abused them, but you might hate that person because of what they've done. In fact, you are likely to hate that person because of what they have done. So take care not to impose your feelings on the child. Children need to come to terms with the abuse in their own way. And if that abuser has been someone they have loved and cared about, it is important to allow them that grieving process. And if you don't feel in a position emotionally to support that, then it's knowing that your child can have a safe space in their counselling where they'll be able to look at some of those emotions. So trying to deny your feelings or allowing them to take over can have massive consequences and can sometimes lead to burnout, anger, frustration, or just the feeling like you can't cope. And that is why it's so important for you to get support that you need. So when I talk about burnout, I'm talking about this being depleted, feeling like there's no energy, that there's nothing left in that cup to give to anyone else. So burnout is that sense of just feeling exhausted, like there's no energy. And some of the signs of burnout can include insomnia, so either feeling extreme tiredness where you just can't sleep at night, your mind is going overtime, you're thinking about everything that's happening, that actually your thoughts are interfering with your sleeping patterns. You can feel a sense of feeling overstimulated. Again, the mind won't switch off. The mind's chattering away, it's talking to you. And because it's constantly on overdrive, there's no escape from it. We can get a lower immunity to illness, so you might notice that you're getting colds more frequently. If you suffer from skin issues such as eczema, you might be getting flare-ups. Our body, when it goes into burnout and when it's overly stressed, it's harder for it to fight. It's harder for it to fight illnesses. You might find that you are holding tension in your body. You might notice that maybe, your shoulders feel tight. You might notice that you're getting headaches. So holding physical tension is one of the first things that we can tune into to notice how we are feeling. If we're relaxed, often our muscles are relaxed. So if you notice and you were to do a quick body scan, just tuning in physically to how the different parts of your body are feeling, you might notice that you are holding tension in a lot of the body. Signs also include low mood, anxiety. You might notice that you're not feeling as hungry, that there's a lack of appetite there. You might find that you are lacking focus, that it feels like you just can't achieve even the smallest of tasks. You might find that your mind is not in work, and because of that, there's a decrease in productivity. And it might not just be in employment, it could be if you're studying in college, or if you are just trying to achieve a task at home, trying to do a chore, but not being able to focus on it. There can also be a real sense of being trapped, not being able to see a way out, no light at the end of the tunnel. And there can just be this real sense of feeling overwhelmed. You might notice that you are getting a little bit more angry or frustrated because your ability to cope, the threshold has become lower. And then one of the massive signs of burnout is self-criticism. Nothing is ever good enough. So this belief that you're failing in some way. And actually, it might be that you just need to take some time for yourself just to build your energy back up, build your immune system back up, allow yourself to mentally switch off, which I know is easier said than done, but it really can make a difference if you can commit to some time where you choose, say, something you enjoy, a hobby, if it means just watching your favourite soap for half an hour. It's thinking about how do you get some self-care time in so that this burnout does not continue. So we wanted to include some reflection points in this part of the course, really just to help you to start to think about, okay, what do I need to do for myself? And yes, we know that you want to be there for your child, but actually how do I think about myself in this process? So this stress audit gets you to reflect on some of the questions below. So as I was just saying, our bodies can hold a lot of physical tension when we're stressed. So one of the first things you can do is just ask yourself, how is my body feeling today? And it might be that you ask yourself in this moment. So it might be you notice that actually, yeah, do you know what, my shoulders feel really tight, or maybe there's a tightness in the stomach. All these can give us an indication into how we are feeling. Do I have a problem that could be stress related? So life is still happening around us, and there can still be additional issues that are being thrown at us constantly while you are going through this difficult and challenging time. Asking yourself, have you become more short-tempered or irritable than you used to be? Are you tired or exhausted? You're having trouble concentrating? Are you overeating or not eating healthy food? Are you eating enough? Or are you turning to unhealthy coping strategies such as smoking and drinking too much? So it might be that you want to come back to some of these questions and reflect on them at a time where you have some moments where you can take yourself away and just think about these things. Reflecting on what has helped you to cope in the past can be a very effective thing for helping you to cope now. Now, there might be some people thinking this is trivialising what you are experiencing, minimising what you are experiencing, but it's not the case. It's about thinking about we all need to be able to cope at times, and we all need to have resources that we can draw on. And no, they might not always work, but having an idea of what we could do and then setting an intention to do it can make even the smallest of differences. So thinking about what has helped you to cope with stress in the past, can you name 12 things that you can do that help you to switch off? And you might think, oh my God, 12 things, that is just too many. Even naming just 2 or 3, or even starting with 1. It's all steps in the right direction. So it says pick 2 of these things that you can do regularly. So it might be that actually there is time in the day that you've got 15 minutes where you can pick up a book. Or maybe, you like those adult colouring books where you can just mindfully absorb yourself in that meditative space of colouring. And then if you do pick two things, have a little reflect after 2 weeks and think, have they worked? Have I been able to commit to them? And if not, what has stopped you from being able to commit to them? What are the barriers that have happened? And are they the right things for you to be doing in this moment? Or do you feel like you need to explore other options? This chart here is called the Vitality Wheel, and it was developed by a woman called Susie Redding. Now, she says that we all need to take steps to self-care, and she's broke them down into 8 sections. So first and foremost, we need our basic needs meeting. We need sleep, rest, relaxation and breathing. So these are our basic physical needs. We all need to sleep. We all need to rest, because what happens if we don't is it places a massive amount of stress and pressure on the functioning of our body and our nervous system. The next one is movement and nutrition. So we know that there's a clear link, the scientific clear link between what we put into our bodies, how we move our bodies, and how this can affect our mood. So for example, if we're putting lots of caffeine into our system, we know that it affects the adrenaline glands, that it makes our heartbeat race, we know it interferes with our sleep. So I'm just using caffeine as an example. So that can impact on good health and nutrition. There's a clear link between exercise, even if it's just going out for a 15-minute walk. We need daylight as human beings as well. And this can be really hard sometimes to get over those winter months. But even just going outside for 15-20 minutes a day can help us get some form of vitamin D. They also say that that is linked to good sleep as well. If we're not exposed to sunlight, then it can upset the rhythms of our sleep. She says we all need coping skills. So going back to what I was saying in previous slides, we all need to know what helps us to switch off and unwind. So it might be reading a book, but sometimes you might find that that isn't always helpful actually in stressful situations. You might find that reading a book, you can't focus on what you're reading. So if this is the case, maybe it's something like you find that you come into the present, you're more mindful when you cook. Really, really understanding, what do I do that makes me feel good? Considering your physical environment as well. So often you might hear people say if there's a cluttered space, they have a cluttered mind. Everyone's different, that might not be the case for you, but thinking about how you can make your physical environment more of a relaxing space and place to be can really help to mentally put you into a different state of mind. In a previous section, or in one of the sections, we do look at the example of a flower. So a flower needs the right conditions to grow. It needs the right soil, the right temperature, it needs plenty of water. And we are like that as human beings. We need to surround ourselves in physical environments that really nurture and nourish us. We also need strong social connections. We are social beings. We are meant to be with other people. That's often why there can be a clear link between low mood and isolation, because we're not supposed to live in isolation. So if you can really identify your support network, who are your friends, who can you talk to, who in your family do you feel like you can go to if you need to? And maybe it's not even about going to them to talk about what's going on for you, just going and having fun with them, or trying to be there to just have a good time. We also need mood boosters. So this is similar to the coping skills. We need to be able to think of what boosts our mood. And then the later two, which Susie says comes as a consequence of all the others being in place, are values and purpose, goal setting and accomplishment. So sometimes even just setting the smallest of goals, like tomorrow I will phone my friend to have a conversation with them. It can feel like such a positive thing to have thought to yourself, this is something I'm going to do, this is something I'm going to achieve. And when you achieve it, it can really add a strong sense of resilience. There is an activity that you can do that is at the end of these slides, where you can reflect on maybe some of the things in this vitality wheel and how you can apply them to yourselves. So part of resilience and being able to cope is about having emotional intelligence. And what I mean by emotional intelligence is basically just the ability to be able to recognise how you're feeling today. And it's such a simple thing, but often many of us really struggle to do it. And I think it's because it's not something that was taught to us as children, or it might have been in some families, but a lot of families won't have taught this. But as generations move on, we're recognising the importance of being able to express, firstly identify and then express emotion. And it's referred to as emotional intelligence. So there's a quote here from a therapist called Margot Sunderland, and she says, when parents cannot acknowledge their own feelings, it's hard for children to speak about theirs. So emotional intelligence is about recognising your emotions and not trying to eradicate them. It's giving yourself permission to feel the way you feel. So if you deny yourself the experience of being able to say, do you know what, I feel sad today, or I feel angry, or I feel like I can't cope, then actually, where does that emotion go? Does it get bottled up? And what does your child see as a consequence of that? Leading by example is the best way forward, and saying, do you know what? Yeah, today I feel sad. You might not go into details of why that is, but it's showing that you are able to express your emotion as well. So knowing your limits is another sign of exercising emotional intelligence. So this is a worksheet, or a copy of a worksheet that we'll often use with people to look at being able to identify what's in your control and what's out of your control. So there can be a tendency in human nature for us to focus on things that actually we can't do anything about. And just by acknowledging that and accepting that can really help us to then start to focus on, okay, what can I do? And when we focus on what is in our control, it is much more empowering. We feel empowered. That is the word. We feel empowered because we feel like, one, we can do something to make a difference, and we can also actively make changes. So again, this exercise will be at the end of these slides for you to be able to take some time, if you wish, knowing that you don't need to do any of these things, but if you do wish to, again, just take some time to consider these things.